That's right, it's me. And we're gonna watch Phallus in Wonderland tonight. How many people have seen it before? Well, a lot of people worked really hard to put this movie out. And it was like our first movie that we had ever really made, our first like long form thing, and a lot of people worked really hard. It was sort of like, we took these characters that were sort of like left over from the comic strips, the Morality Squad, which is sort of like these people who had chased Sleazy to Antarctica where he found Gwar. And so they were sort of like just these throwaway characters, and we were sort of sitting around, well, what are we going to do for the next show? Let's bring out the Morality Squad. And so by that time I had done Techno Destructo on the first leg of our first national tour and everything, and everybody was pretty much sick of him. So this time out I played Edna Grambo, leader of the Morality Squad. So that's right, I went from marauding cyborg from outer space to little old lady in a wheelchair and all like that. So Edna is a great villain for Gwar because she's this little old lady in a wheelchair, but it's a four-wheel drive wheelchair. It has these huge tires on it, and during the live show, she would throw the wheels off. So when I would be in this costume, I was actually in the wheelchair costume. It wasn't a little old lady costume. That was just a puppet. Only her head was real. All of the rest of my body was inside the wheelchair, so that when she would come out, she would run over Odorous with the chair, and then she would throw the wheels off, and she would be like flying around with this buzzsaw on. And this movie chronicles Gwar's struggle against oppression. But it's sort of like based on a real story too, because as we wrote this story and we started touring across country with it, Odorous actually did get arrested at one night, where the cops showed up and they sat there and they watched the whole show, and they wanted to arrest multiple people in the band, but because we went backstage and changed out of the costumes, the cops weren't sure who had played what characters. But they saw him, take the penis off, and they picked it up and put it in a white construction bucket like it was a rattlesnake, and took him to jail that night, And then there was a long court case and all that. So some of the stuff that happens in this movie is based on our experiences in the court and all that stuff. But it's also a bunch of stuff we made up before then. But it's all about Phallus in Wonderland. And Wonderland, it's not like an Alice in Wonderland parody at all. Wonderland is America. This was actually nominated for a Grammy. That's right. Gwar was actually nominated for a Grammy. No bullshit. Annie Lennox won that year. She had done some long-form video. The category was long-form video. And Weird Al Yankovic was the guy who nominated us and sort of campaigned and spread the word about us. And that was the first that a lot of people had ever heard about Gwar, for sure. It didn't really raise Gwar's status as much as it sort of lowered the status of the Grammys. A lot of blood, sweat, and tears that went into this movie, and the finished thing was way different from the original conception. But crazy projects are like that. When you run out of budget, you run out of time. That's what Hollywood's all about. One of the things you'll notice in the movie is that the all-American superhero, his costume is not red, white, and blue. It's red, white, and yellow. And some people have come up to me and gone, wow, that's like a big statement on America, that it's red, white, and yellow and stuff like that. But in reality, it was just a stupid fuck-up, because we were using so much blue screen that this super intelligent director was like, no, that'll clash with the blue screen. It'll screw up the blue screen, so he's got to be yellow. And so we painted him yellow. And then afterwards, we didn't have the money to go back and change every single one of those shots back to blue. That was one of the first things that we had to scrub. There's a scene of Gwar in outer space before they came to Earth, where Techno Destructo and Odorous are fighting side by side, which is pretty interesting. That day, we shot like there were all of these people in costume, and we had run out of film, so we were shooting everything in slow motion, where it used to No, fast motion. So we were using up less footage, and then we slowed everything down when we got into post. And that way we could maximize. That's why a lot of the film is really grainy. A lot of the artiness of this movie is just because of desperation, trying to stretch the budget and stuff like that. Actually, Gibby plays the part of a director. He's like a German director who is like filming the Gwar cereal commercial. And in this one, Sleazy has set Gwar up with a Gwar cereal commercial, and in the commercial, you get stuff like crack pipes and stuff like that come inside the box and things like that. So as the kids eat the cereal, they start to age rapidly, and it's pretty weird. The main guy is Bill. His name is Bill Morrison. He's the one who's responsible for all the awesome effects and blue screens and stuff like that. But he had this guy who was hanging out. When I went and met with them and talked to them, and I was checking out the studio, and I was trying to see if, are these guys capable of doing the kind of effects and stuff that we want. Bill really impressed me. And he had this other guy that was hanging out with him that was sort of like his coffee boy. And I was like, that guy, yeah, okay, whatever. So then I get back to Virginia, and it turns out that Coffee Boy is the director. And I was like, what? So that's how it was. So he comes to Virginia and hangs out with us for like a whole month, where he's like strutting around with these leather pants on, condescending to all us stupid rednecks, telling us how to make the movie, and all this stuff. And I was like, dude, for all the shit that you've given us, you better deliver the goods, And the first day we were filming this scene of the cracking the egg, and he like freaks out, and like he disappeared to the hotel room because we were all gonna kill him. We were all so mad. So Bill thought it was best to just keep him to the hotel room until it was time for them to go back to Canada. After that. But we got it done. There was a lot of 14, 16, 18, 20-hour days, and stuff like that, where just the bare people that were needed to make the scene were staying up all night working on it. As Gwar, the dinosaur, is like 10 feet tall, but once we had put all the blue screen stuff in and everything and the lights and all, once we put his feet on and everything, he was too tall. So if you notice in the scenes of Gwar crashing through the city, he doesn't have any feet. We had to take his feet off.
What was your favorite experience in making this movie?
Wow. There's a part in it where we had this guy who used to hang out with us who was sort of like our bouncer. He was like this big, huge dude, and he just sort of hung out, and he was our bouncer. We would take him on trips sometimes. Sometimes we would try to get him to drive, but he wasn't very good at that. But anyway, in this scene, there's a part where Gwar is flying in their bat-shaped helicopter, and they're showing the slave drive engine, because Gwar's technology is driven on slave drive engines and stuff, where you have a person running on a conveyor belt and they're like pumping crack or something into their face to give them enough energy to keep going. So we got this guy, we used to call him Mark the Skinhead, and he's the engine of the human drive engine. And you'll see this scene when they show bat-shaped helicopter, that's when it's coming. But it was really funny because Chuck Barga, this executioner, designed and built this thing himself, So he built the slave drive engine, and he actually did it. I couldn't believe he actually did it so well, and it came out great. And so there's Mark the Skinhead, and he's on the conveyor belt, and he's running, and all of his girth is like wiggling and jiggling all over the place. And oh my God, it is so funny. And the slaves are going, more crack, feed it, we need more crack, And he still has a heart attack and dies in the scene, and they all crash. And well, I don't want to give it away. Another funny thing that we used to do a lot in the Gwar shows that made it into this movie is we used to actually plant protesters outside of our own shows. And we would a lot of our hanger-on friends and stuff, like Mark the Skinhead, we would give them a sign, that said something like "Gwar is obscene filth," or something like that. And then we would have them outside the show for the first hour before the show starts, walking back and forth going, you know, down with Gwar, down with Gwar, you know, and then the show starts, and whoa, those are the protesters we just saw outside. They're on stage now. Oh my God, what's going on? You know, and then they get killed by Gwar. So that was always a fun way to start the show because the crowd had seen them as they were coming in. All right, eat pizza, drink beer.